On today's episode of 427 Motorsports, we're going to have a look at probably the newest thing we will ever have on this channel and what we believe to be the last true enthusiast's Golf GTI, the Mk7.5. So a quick update on life for us at 427 here before we get started into the Mk7. So this is our first all new video of 2023 and it's only taken us a bloody month to get started, but due to technical difficulties, both with camera equipment and man equipment, all we've been able to do for the last week, man equipment sounds rude, doesn't it? Oh well, we have only been able to continue with our podcast, so if you haven't already, head on to Spotify and check us out on the Wagoncast, where we talk each week, not necessarily about cars, but about random shit that makes us happy or sad or laugh. You'll probably laugh as well. At least 3 people have told us it's funny, so that means it's funny statistically. So now we've got ourselves some nice new camera equipment and we're ready to get stuck into videoing. The weather is getting better, we've got a course stretch in the evenings, so now it's time to get stuck in. Let's head to that Golf. So this is the Mk7.5 Golf. That's what it's unofficially known as. And this is the GTI, which of course means it's the best one, even though there's a model above it which is faster and probably better in every way. But to us, this is the best one. Now this does belong to my girlfriend Jen, so I have to be at least relatively nice about it. But I will be honest and talk about it properly. Now last week, or was it last week? It was at some point, we had the opportunity to drive the Mk8 Golf GTI just after this one was got. So we were able to have a good direct side-by-side comparison. We were helping out the guys at McKinney Motors on Facebook and Keelan at Art Media. He asked us to do camera car duties while he was recording a Lamborghini Huracan that they were raffling. So it gave us a good chance to have a hands-on with the Mk8 after having driven the 7.5. And whilst this one may be part of our fleet now, it doesn't mean that we're completely biased towards it compared to the Mk8. There are pros and cons to both. So there's a couple of wee things I want to talk about with the 7.5, because whenever Jen was looking at buying this one, it was actually very hard to find out specific information about some of the things that we wanted to know. So I just wanted to get into a couple of little things here first before we get started. First of all, we started off at the interior with its gorgeous tartan seats and the DSG gearbox, which we'll get into a little bit later on. The tartan seats really were kind of the selling point for getting the GTI, I'll be honest. Now this one is the 5-door. They do still actually make 3 doors of the 7.5. Volkswagen announced a while back that they were doing away with the 3-door, but there were 3-door options, so maybe it wasn't through the entire 7.5 range, I'm not so sure. But one of the things we wanted to know about whenever we were doing it is regarding the instrument cluster and the radio. Now, this comes with Android Play and CarPlay and all of those goodness things, but it also has sat-nav built in. Okay, so looking at the instrument cluster, now this one, as I said, has CarPlay and Android Play and all that. But what this one here has is the sat-nav, and one of the cool features about the Mk7 is the fact that when you put the ignition on, you get your clocks and it does all the cool, good stuff. But what you can do, if it'll let me, brings the map onto the middle of the dash, which is really, really cool. Except the sat-nav on the factory version isn't actually that great. This one here has had nothing but issues. For example, it thinks we're currently sitting in England, judging by those roads, which we aren't. We're literally in Ireland here. And at one point I thought we were in the middle of the ocean. It actually decided to put us in the middle of the ocean. God knows why. And it's a bit crap. Though it has the CarPlay. If you hit app, you got your CarPlay, so you can have your normal maps on here, which you can actually trust. And I just realized we're kind of showing our location, so I'm just gonna cover that with my hands. But needless to say, they are 2 completely different locations. But what's really annoying is you can go on to this and you can have your music showing up in this, and it'll say Apple CarPlay. Now it doesn't actually tell you if you go onto Spotify and you play something, which I will turn down so that nobody can tell, or copyright can't tell, should I say. We have our artwork and all here, that's great, but it still just says Apple CarPlay here. Now if you connect to Bluetooth, or if you have your SD card in, it will tell you the artist, the album, everything, but on CarPlay it just defaults to CarPlay, and that's very annoying. But the most annoying thing is, for how cool that sat-nav is, back to my initial point, if you have your maps, which I'm still going to try and hide, if you have your maps on this, it won't send the maps to this, which means you're stuck having the crappy Volkswagen factory maps if you want it there. And the maps being there is one of the coolest things. As far as I'm aware, there's no sat-nav update to make this work, and I'm pretty sure the Mark 8 is actually the same, because I had my phone into the Mark 8 with the CarPlay and it still didn't show on that screen what you were listening to, and it kind of defeats the entire point of having anything there unless you're listening to the radio or your Bluetooth. It doesn't do anything. I'm sure everybody has an iPhone or an Android these days, so they're all going to be using the CarPlay. Just a bit of an oversight from Volkswagen, and I really think they should look into that. But whether that would work or not was one of the main questions I had whenever we were looking into them, and nobody on YouTube wanted to answer that. So if you were wondering about that extremely niche thing, it's probably a weird thing to open the video with, but just a bit of peace of mind for you there. Now, these gauges are the main difference, personally, I think, between the facelift and the non-facelift. So they were kind of a deal maker for me, even though it wasn't my car choice. It wasn't my car and I didn't really have any say on it. But as a word of warning, not every 7.5 comes with these gauges, because there were some facelifts that didn't have them that I could see when we were looking for one to buy. So just be aware of that. Another cool thing I do really like is the driver profiles. So I think you can have like 4 or 5. We only have 2. We have one for Jen and one for me, and it means that when you get into the car, it asks you which profile you want to use. It defaults to number 1, and that's Jen because it's her car, funny enough. But if you change it to number 2, it changes your clocks to whatever setting you had. It changes the climate control to whatever setting you had. All your radio presets change to what you wanted rather than what the other person wanted. And when you change between the profiles, it all automatically changes to suit whoever's driving. Unfortunately, this doesn't have electric seats, so I assume if it did, it would also like take the position that you want. But that's a pretty cool feature. Other than that, to be quite honest with you, there's not many differences between the 7.5 and the 7. It's just a bit newer, it's a bit nicer looking, I think, and all around just a couple of niggly wee improvements. So yeah, let's have a look under the bonnet. Not that you'll see very much because it's a modern car, but we'll have a look anyway. Okay, so onto the bonnet here. Now this is the 2-litre Golf GTI. I'm not sure when this engine was introduced, to be quite honest, but this one is running 230 horsepower, and being totally honest, it's about as much as you need, because this thing is stupid fast as it is. Real world figures, it'll go very, very fast on the motor. You will lose your license very quickly. It's supposed to do about 150 miles per hour, give or take. It'll do 0 to 60 and quicker than you can blink. Fuel economy, for people who listen to our podcast and watch our channel, is probably a bit more important, because these are all stingy bastards like ourselves. Fuel economy in this. Now, if you drive it like a baby, which is how I normally drive things because I'm used to them falling apart, let's be real. The highest I've gotten is 45.3 miles per gallon. That's pretty damn good. Now that was a motorway run and that was best possible conditions. There is an eco mode on this which completely changes how the turbo kicks in, which means then that you can drive a lot smoother and more gradually, and obviously then use less fuel. With the eco mode on, I was getting the 45. If you really want to, you can get it as low as about 15 to 20, but hey ho, let's not think about that too much. But to be honest, for the all-round package that it is, I think it really is. There's not many other things you could ask of it. It does everything, and it does everything very well, which is a very Golf GTI thing to do. So this GTI has been fitted with the DSG gearbox. Now this is Volkswagen's equivalent of an automatic, like in our Mercs. This was spec'd because my girlfriend she drove the 211 and decided, yep, automatic is the thing for me, so fair enough. Now the controversial statement about the DSG versus the manual is that the DSG is actually a lot quicker. This thing will change gears quicker than you could ever imagine, and before you've even thought about going from first to second, this thing's already in third. Like it's that quick. This has a readout on the gauge telling you what gear you're in, and it's mind-blowing seeing just how quickly it's going through them, and the fact that you can't feel it. They are so smooth. I've never driven a DSG before, and I'm definitely converted. I'm torque converted. So the way it works is you have your pedal here, you have a button on the back for going through. Now it's not like the Jags where you have to move it manually into each notch. It's just up or down. The button has to be pressed no matter where you go, which is probably a better safety thing, I would say, than the automatics where you just have to press it to get out of park and that's it. But the cool part about it is, the PlayStation gamer in me will say, is that on the back of the steering wheel here, the lovely red stitched leather GTI steering wheel, is your flappy paddles. And it basically just makes you feel like a racing driver. I know flappy paddles are so early 2000s, like you'd think they've replaced it by now, but they just work really, really well. And it maybe inspires too much confidence, I think, because it does feel It does feel like a PlayStation game. Now I will say the Mark 8 GTI does actually drive better than this. And that's a controversial statement in that it handles better. It doesn't feel as quick, but that's not to say this thing maybe hasn't had something done to it, because it's had the resonator deleted already, not by us, but by the previous owner. So for all we know, maybe it's been mapped or anything. It's hard to tell, but I feel like since it was bought from the dealership, it probably isn't mapped. But the Mark 8 GTI was actually slower than this one, but it was a tighter car. Now the one we drove actually felt like it was falling to bits, to be honest. Like, it was bad knocks and things, but the handling of it, it took corners in ways that I didn't think a front wheel drive car could. This thing is very, very good, but we haven't really had the weather to fully thrash it yet. But we'll take it out on the road and get some driving thoughts.
Right, so what's this thing actually like to drive then? Well, as somebody who daily drove a GTI, granted it was a Mark II, I kind of have a bit of experience with what a GTI, in my opinion, should be. And this one is kind of, it hits the nail on the head. It's classy, it's fast as hell when you want it to be, but when you don't want it to be, it's a sensible, quiet, everyday run around. Plenty of boot space, as everyone says, and all the rest. The only problem I have with this car is it's actually kinda uncomfortable. Maybe this one needs some bushings changed or something, I'm not sure, but as you can see in our footage, it's kinda bouncy. Maybe they all are. The Mark 8 actually was kinda bouncy as well. It's on a par with my Mark II that you can see there, which is lowered. So I don't know if that's correct or not, to be quite honest. But other than that, the driving experience, it's raw, it's connected, but sensible and quiet at the same time. The electronic handbrake is a bit of a pain in the arse. I really don't like that. And I personally would have a manual, but you know what? I think they really are the perfect everything car.
Before I do talk about the difference between this and the Mark 8, there's something that's really, really cool that blew my mind. The Mark 7 might just do it as well, but I've only seen it before in this one. Check this out. So your parcel shelf, Connor, you're gonna like this because you haven't seen this. The parcel shelf, say you've got, for example, a Labradoodle or something that needs to be taken somewhere, but you've got the parcel shelf and you're like, oh no, what am I gonna do? Well, you struggle to take it off first. You lift this. They have designed it so that the parcel shelf will fit in there somehow. Aye, you pop that out. I'm not making a good example of this, am I? So the parcel shelf goes in there, and then you slide those back to wherever you took them off of, or whatever. And that goes like that, and then you can take your parcel shelf with you, so you don't have to like leave it at the house or whatever. So if you've taken a big object somewhere and then you're coming home, and you don't have the big object anymore, you can still hide it. There's also a 12-volt socket here, which I've only just noticed now, which is great. The thing we're here to talk about today actually is the difference between this and a Mark 8. Now the Mark 8 is the current newest model GTI on the market. The waiting list, we were told when we went to buy one, is a year and a half. That's a very long time, and they've already talked about the fact as of last week or so, they've already talked about the fact that the new Golf, the 9, is in development and is due to come out in maybe 2024 or something like that, or 2025. So by the time you've got your new Mark 8 ordered and built, the new one's going to be out, and you're not even going to be the snob that has the newest car. So what's the point? But the main difference, I think, other than aesthetics, between the Mark 8 and the 7.5, and even the 7, I suppose, and every model before it, is the way that cars these days are now going. Volkswagen aren't the only ones guilty of this, but the Volkswagen is what we have the experience of here, so that's what we're going to talk about. And the problem is, it's the change, and I'm not talking about that change. I can see you laughing, Connor. That change that women go through. No, this is... The problem is, it's the change between analog and digital. Now the Mark 7 and the 7.5 is the very, as far as we're concerned, unless the world decides, yes, this is a dumb idea. The problem is, it's the defining line between the transition of mechanical and analog to everything being touch sensitive and digitally controlled. The interior on this Mark 7.5, as you can see, is a mixture of touchscreens and actual buttons. All your temperature controls are still nice dials that you can feel when you're driving. The radio, despite the fact that all of those things inside a touchscreen, still has one physical knob on the left. You can turn it down, you can turn it up, and if you're in a panic, you don't have to think, you just instinctively turn that down and that's it. The Mark 8 that we drove, and what really got to us, is the fact that everything is touchscreen. And that is the way that things are going these days. In all of electric cars, in all internal combustion engine cars, for as long as they're going to last, everything now is touch sensitive, and it is an absolute pain in the ass. If you want to change your heated seats, you have to go into a menu, tap it 3 times and get it to go up to the one that you want. If you want to adjust your climate control, you have to touch it, go into a menu, drag or slide up and do what you want to do. It completely takes away the accessibility of a modern car to, say, the older generation who would still want to buy them. Actually, let's be real, the people who can afford to buy a new modern car don't know how to work them. I used to work at a motor factory not that long ago, and the amount of times I had people coming in saying, I don't even know how to turn my heater controls down in my car. It's blasting cold air and I'm freezing. And I've had to go in and try and work it out for them and show them, you have to go here, touch that, tap that until it goes into the red, and then that'll be hot. That's such a bollock. There's absolutely no need for that. And one thing that I noticed when I was driving the Mark 8 was that everything, even the buttons on the steering wheel, was completely touch sensitive. And this meant if you're driving around, having a bit of fun, you're constantly touching the controls as you're going around because it's touch sensitive. Now on the Mark 7.5 here, as you can see, on the steering wheel, there are individual buttons, same as any of the steering wheel controls that have been in cars for years. But then the Mark 8, it's the same amount of controls, yes, but it's one smooth panel, and it depends on where you touch, like on your phone. But they are just far too close to the edge to be usable. Whenever you're holding your steering wheel like that, and you're going around the corners and really giving her welly, I turned on the heated steering wheel controls 4 times in 3 corners. And you could feel it vibrate on your palm. I wasn't like touching it or anything, it was, my palm was ever so slightly too close, and it decided, oh, he wants his heated steering wheel on. At 75 miles an hour going around a hairpin. No, he doesn't. And it's an absolute nightmare, and it's just more things that are gonna go wrong. And if you want to get out and truly drive and enjoy your hot hatch, which is what this is, sure, maybe it's fine in a standard run-of-the-mill Golf, I guess, but hot hatches are made to be driven, and what they're doing is they're making it more and more difficult for people to go out and actually just enjoy having a thrash in their GTI. It's a nightmare. So there we are. In conclusion, what do we reckon? Mark 7.5 versus the Mark 8 as the true enthusiast car. I think it's got to be the Mark 7.5 because the Mark 8 is going to annoy too many people with all of this stupid electrical nannies going on, and just the lack of thought that went into where they placed all of these touch sensitive things. It's not going to last, and I really hope that car manufacturers, because it's not just Volkswagen doing it, to be fair, but I really hope that car manufacturers realize this is not the way to go, because it's going to cause more accidents than prevent them. If they say that driving well on your phone is distracting, it's nowhere near as distracting as trying to work out how the hell to turn the heat up when you're going down the road. Like, it's going to lead to a lot of accidents and a lot of bad things. So with any joy, they'll have a bit of sense and wise up. But for now, if you're considering getting a new Volkswagen Golf or a very new second-hand one, that's your Golf. Not the Mark 8. That's your Golf. Thank you very much for watching this different episode of 427 Motorsports, but we're going to do a bit more of them as time comes. I've been Tomo.Pattison as always. Behind the camera has been Hughes Corporation, who hasn't had a microphone today because we are testing out this new equipment with this video, so we'll have us back to our usual banter next time. But check us out on Spotify at The Wagoncast, follow us on Instagram, check us out on Facebook, and all the rest. Thank you very much for watching, and good luck to you. He says good luck as well.